Around the Tokyo Olympics, our Olympic team was confronted with quite a number of hamstring injuries, especially in our track and field athletes. But not only Team Belgium, also other countries suffered a high number of hamstring tears in their elite athletes. It was believed that the new super spikes and also the fast track in Tokyo had played a certain role in this. But nevertheless, this triggered a lot of scientific research into hamstring muscle injury worldwide. And this has helped us to understand now much better why and how these hamstring tears occur and how we can prevent them, especially in our sprinting athletes. We know today that the critical part in the running cycle is here. We call this phase the terminal swing phase. So it is late in the forward swinging phase of the leg, where the hamstrings are relatively long and in heavy eccentric mode. That means that they are getting longer while strongly contracting. So with the hip in a lot of flexion and the knee close to extension. So the hamstrings are here being stretched while contracting at the same time. And that is the danger phase where they can tear, because they are in what we call high eccentric loading. So in other words, if we want less hamstring injuries, we need the hamstrings of our athletes to become stronger under high eccentric loading, and at the same time at long muscle fiber length, so hip inflection, knee close to extension. So that is what they need to train in. Now, there is something else, and that is muscle fascicle length. We know now for sure that the risk for hamstring tear is directly related to the length of your muscle fascicles. You see that on this graph. If your hamstring muscle fascicles are short, you have a high risk for hamstring tears. If your hamstring muscle fascicles are long, you have a small risk for hamstring tears. So how do you get long hamstring fascicle length? Interestingly, by eccentric training in long muscle length. So for the hamstrings, that means hip flexed, knee close to extension. So another reason to incorporate eccentric hamstring training at long muscle length. And this is especially true for older athletes and also after previous hamstring injury, because we know that both these factors, age and previous hamstring tear, aggravate this effect. Here you see this. The younger you are, the lower your risk of tearing, even if you have short fascicles. This is the graph for 18 years old, 20 years old, 24, 28, and 32 years old. The older, the higher the risk, especially if you have short fascicles. Same if you have ever had a previous hamstring tear. Then you have a higher risk for a new tear, especially if you have short fascicles. So all reasons to make the hamstrings fascicle longer. And today we know there is one very effective way to achieve that. That is eccentric strength training at long muscle fiber length. Studies have shown that this is indeed the most effective way to develop long fascicles. What you definitely should not do is concentric hamstring strengthening, because that has the opposite effect. It shortens the fascicle length. And that is a very often mistake made by many athletes. They want to make their hamstrings stronger to protect them against tearing, and they use concentric exercises for that. So in fact, by doing so, they increase their risk for tearing, because they create significantly shorter fascicles. So instead, eccentric training at long fiber length. Now, point number 2. The hamstrings need to fire fast and repeatedly, because they need to follow the quadriceps firing with every step. So every time the quadriceps fires, the hamstrings need to follow. So in a sprint, that means twice per second at an angular velocity of 120 degrees per second. So that is really fast. So your hamstrings not only should be strong in eccentric mode, they should be strong especially in fast eccentric mode. And they should stay strong for as long as the sprint takes. 10 to 13 seconds for a 100 meter, up to 45-55 seconds for a 400 meter. So you need to train eccentric strength at high loads, at long fiber length, at high speed, at high frequency, and long enough to withstand fiber fatigue long enough for the duration of the sprint. We call that strength endurance training, to keep the strength up as long as the task requires. And that is especially important for fast twitching athletes, that are athletes with a lot of fast muscle fibers, like indeed sprinters. Because we know since recently that these fast twitching athletes have a 20% higher fatigue and 15 times longer recovery time than slow fiber athletes. So to summarize, eccentric strength training at high loads, at long fiber length, at high contraction velocity, at high contraction frequency, with long enough duration, depending on the duration of the sprint, 100 to 400 meters, and with sufficient recovery time, especially for fast-twitching athletes. So that is clear. Now, how do we do that? Aha! That is what almost everybody today is looking into. Because indeed, all of this is much easier said than done. Let's say the Holy Grail has not been found yet. Several options come close. Eccentric overload training, high angular speed Cybex training, flywheel training, high-speed velocity-based training, but none of them covers the whole basket of requirements. Except sprinting. I mean fast sprinting, exceeding 90% of maximum sprinting velocity. Yes, you may say, but that is how they get injured during fast sprinting. And yes, you are right. So this dilemma we are all confronted with. The whole sports medical world, trainer and coaches, are currently trying to solve this paradigm. And we are getting close, but not fully there yet. Thank you for watching.